Ethan, good job on your script. Other than it has a lot of typos, you were able to use the software effectively. I see that you were able to do the scene headings, the characters, the dialogue, and the parentheticals. And you ended up with 2 scenes, and we know that scenes change when we change characters, change locations, or change interior, exterior, and so you only had 1 scene change, which was correct because we had characters entering and exiting a scene, but we didn't actually change our location or whether it was interior, exterior, or day or night. And so good job. I gave you full credit on that. I know you had to download and learn that software, and that's our first step because we are going to be writing a short screenplay. And let me go ahead and minimize this. For next week, I'm going to have you analyze a student project, some students at Grace Academy's project, their screenplay, and then they ended up filming it. And what I will do is I'm going to upload the analysis. The name of their film was Man Up. And I'm going to have you do an analysis of their play, movie, video. And it has all the parts. It's pretty pure in how you put together a movie. You start with your main character, and as you're looking at theirs, I want you to be thinking because you're going to be writing yours. You don't have to film it unless you just want to later. This would actually, they filmed it later. You're going to be writing yours, and these are the things you'll have to include in yours. And keep in mind that each page of a screenplay ends up being about 1 minute of film time. And so when you watch Man Up, it is about a 20 minute, there it is, 20 minute skit, video, let me just call it video, and that was a 20-page script. And so that's what you're going to shoot for, is about a 20-page, which would translate into 20 minutes of film. Okay, now why won't it work? Okay. Here's the questions you're going to answer as you watch Man Up. Who is your main character? And when you're picking out a main character for your screenplay, give this some thought as you look at theirs. And it's best to write something you know. So you might want to make your main character your age or an age that you've been. It's kind of hard to write about a character that you haven't had any experiences about. So pick your age, male and female, and the physical characteristics. And I know some writers will actually look through a magazine and pick out someone in the magazine, and that will be their character. Because in your mind, when you're writing this, you have to be able to visualize your character. So if you want to pick out a magazine person and just tape it up, so you can start thinking about the character. And when I write, I do that. I actually go through the magazines and pick out my characters. I know who they're going to be, but I will forget who has blue eyes or who is like this or their ages because you start getting involved in your story. So it's nice to be able to look up at that picture and be able to make a comment about that character's physical traits. So be thinking about that. And any good movie, any good story starts out with the way things are. And if you think about going to movies, usually, I mean, there have been times when I went to movies where they just bam, hit you with the action. And those are sometimes disturbing, sometimes not. But usually there's a portion where they tell you about the way things are previous to the conflict. And sometimes they do hit you with the conflict, but then they'll do some backstory and show you that main character's life before the conflict. So regardless of how you would do your script, think about the way things are. So how is this person's life before the conflict hits? There's 3 types of conflict. You have man versus man versus himself, and man versus nature. This is all the conflicts there are. And in this Man Up video, all three of them are present, and you have to describe them. Let's see if I can make that where it won't pop up. And I want you to describe them, but they were able to include all three, and hopefully you'll be able to include all three in your script. The story goal. Every story has a goal, and it is what your main character wants. Now, the main character may not know they want this at the beginning, when the way things are, but usually the main character at the beginning of a story does have some type of desire, but the story goal is what the main character wants to achieve by the end of the movie. And if you've ever been to a movie and you walked out and didn't like it, I can tell you it's because your main character did not achieve their story goal. And those type of movies are very unsatisfying. And books. When I've read a book and the main character didn't accomplish what you were rooting for them to do, after you're done, you usually say, I hate that book, or I hate that movie, or that's what I do. So everyone likes to root for the main character, and they like the main character achieve the story goals. And if you go to any movies in the next few weeks, we'll be working on this for the next 3 weeks. If you go to any movies in the next few weeks, start noticing this pattern. It is in every book and every movie you see, and even every sitcom that you watch. And just a little bit of Happy Days that you watched, you saw that Richie was having a conflict. First he had a conflict with the bullies, so that was kind of a man versus man. And then he was having a conflict with himself because the girl that he liked, when he didn't stand up for himself, didn't help at all. When he didn't stand up for himself, she dumped him. So he was having a conflict. And you're going to find the conflict in man versus man. So story goal, be thinking about what you want your character to achieve. And then you're going to talk about the way things change. And as we proceed through the story, things are going to change. And a great story has your main character encountering a bunch of conflicts, and one after another, this character has these conflicts until you think the character is going to break. And then the conflict is resolved. And at the end of a narrative, I know we've talked about this in narrative writing, but the end of a video, a movie, a book, the character has to have learned something. So what do you want your character to learn? And when you're doing your script, you have to have all this stuff answered before you start writing. So this week we're going to analyze Man Up. Next week I'm going to have you answer these questions about the screenplay you're going to write, and then the last week we're going to put the screenplay through Celtics. So you be thinking about what you want your main character to learn, and then you're going to have a problem sequence. And in Man Up, I think there's 7 or 8 problems, 7 real easy to define problems. So I want you to look for the problem sequence that the main character goes through, and then how's it concluded, and did the main character achieve the story goal. So that's pretty much every book, every movie you love follows a conflict. The character has a story goal. Whether they achieve it or not really depends on whether you like it. And it's simply a bunch of problems that this main character encounters. And we always like to root for the main character. And that's part of being a good writer or a good director, is you make the main character lovable, or you make the main character someone that the audience can identify with. And so if they can identify with this character and see part of themselves in the character, they're going to root for that character. And then the opposite happens. Part of our problem sequence is going to be our villains. And these are going to be people that are going to impede our main character reaching their story goal. And in Man Up, you're going to see a couple of them. But there's also other problems that our character in Man Up is going to encounter that is going to keep him from reaching his story goal or impede him from reaching his story goal. And you'll have to decide whether you thought he reached his story goal. Now, the story goal isn't something that's necessarily set out in the beginning of the story, but it starts developing through the story. And then at the end, we realize he's achieved it or not. And I think I've shown you this before, but let me just review this. The visual, I like to do visualization of what it's going to look like. This is what a story looks like. And here's our beginning. Here's our character, the way he is. And then he encounters a sequence of problems. And this is called our rising conflict. And the problems get worse or more complicated, or there's just multiple problems. And you're just like, oh my gosh, is he ever going to get out of it? And right when you think that he may not make it, then you have your climax of your story. And after that, things start tying up neatly. And then we have our character here, and he's different. He's not a different character. He's different in his traits. He learned something. And so every good story, our character, who we have him the way he is, he has problems, and then he does something or something happens that helps him to resolve it. And this is usually when you're sitting on the edge of your seat in the movie theater trying to figure out what in the world is he going to do. And then something happens, it's resolved. And then basically the last little part of the movie is tying up loose ends. I don't know if you've seen Die Hard or any of those movies, but you notice that you just think he's going to die. Then something happens, and then he defeats the enemy, and then this last little part, he usually goes back and lands the plane or whatever and meets up with his wife or something. And so we just tie up the loose end, put the character kind of back where he was before, but he's changed, and he hopefully changed for the better. If he changed for the worse, we usually don't like it. If he didn't resolve his problem, we usually don't like it. So I meant to underline that. We want the problem resolved. We want the character to learn something. We want him to be a better person at the end. And so you're going to take this Man Up video. So you're going to have two videos loaded up. You're going to have the lesson video, and you're going to have Man Up. And I'm also going to load this Man Up analysis as a document so you can I don't want this to start playing. Okay, good. So that you can print it out and then go ahead and give it back to me. There's not a lot of space, so I don't think you'll be able to write in here. So you'll probably be writing a few paragraphs in between here, especially in the conflict. You're going to have to describe the man versus man conflict, the man versus himself, and the man versus nature conflict. There's only one problem with this Man Up, and as you watch it you may figure it out. It's not clear. He says in the coffee shop, so you can watch this and just kind of watch for it, that he has to do a documentary. And it's never clear why he has to do the documentary. There's not enough backstory in his actions. I think they did a great job on getting everything else in there, but you may notice that you're like, why is he doing this? And so they didn't really identify what set it into motion except saying he was making a documentary. You don't know if he's a college student or what, but also notice in Man Up, and this is what all the directors go through. They went to Goodwill and picked out the clothes to match the character. And another effect that they worked towards was when he started, he was nice and clean, and at the end, he was filthy. And so that was a physical change that we were supposed to notice. And then hopefully a character change that we'll notice from beginning to end. So when you go to a movie, just remember everything's on purpose. When you read a book, everything's on purpose. They don't put an extra word in there for no reason. There's not a scene in a movie that's not important. Even the little details are important. And if you've ever watched a movie, the first time you kind of get the overview of the story. The second time, if you watch it over and over, you pick up other little things, and you can pick up more and more little things. But this right here, we're just going to go with hopefully a 20-minute screenplay, 20 pages, and you're going to be answering these questions next week. So be thinking about what you're going to do with your character. Think of a character. What's his problem going to be? What's he going to learn? And hopefully, watching Man Up will give you an idea of how you can pull that all off. This is a 20-minute student-made video from a few years back, and I hope you enjoy this. I always enjoy doing the screenwriting because I don't think students really know what all goes into making even a sitcom, how many hours writers spend working on it and getting that conflict right, and then how much the actors actually have to bring to the situation, because all they have are some words on a page, and then the director has the vision of the setting and the location and what they're wearing, and so the director brings a lot of vision to a movie, and a writer brings the screenplay. A lot of times they read the book, put the dialogue in, and move the story along using dialogue and character action. And so you don't get any backstory, or you can't have anybody thinking out loud unless they're going to walk around and talk out loud. And I just think it's a very interesting process, and why movies sometimes take several years to make. I've been waiting for Jurassic Park 4 to come out for a long time, and it's going to be out really soon. So I'm going to see what they were able to pull out with that one. Okay, go ahead, watch Man Up, do your character analysis, but while you're doing it, be thinking about next week when you have to answer these questions. That's the end of the video.